revitalized peace agreement and its implementation. I'll look critically at the speech of President Salva Kiir yesterday and also look at the status of peace implementation. I'm joined live in the studio by Edmond Yakani, the Executive Director of Community Empowerment for Progress Organization. He is a civil society activist. It's good to have you with us. It's been a while, Edmond Yakani. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
What do you make of the speech of President Salva Kiir yesterday, particularly on the issue of security and also the revitalized peace agreement? It is said that there was panic in the capital, Juba, yesterday.
Yeah, thank you. It's one of the areas I'd like to say first thanks to the President responding to the calls that we made. And I think that has made us very, 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 very impressed that at least we feel the speech of the President or the address of the President, it will calm down the situation, because there was panic for the last 2 days, and specifically the day before yesterday night when people are seen in uniform on the street and diverting directions. People were speculating news that are not good, and everybody's referring to 2013, everybody's referring to 2016. Then in the morning, of course, some of us wake up and start reaching out to some few close people to the President and through radio outlets asking the President to address the nation in order to calm the situation. Of course, he did that, and I think thanks. We appreciate that at least as a President.
So he responded positively.
He have responded positively to the calls that was made. And of course, we expect initially that when the President is going to address the nation, few things have to be clearly put on the table. One is the question of calling all the fighting forces around the areas of Maiwut, Pagak, Longochuk to cease hostility, because we feel the language of cease hostility is very important. That's why we feel we, as South Sudanese, we can disagree politically. By the way, it's not a unique case that is only in South Sudan people disagree. Everywhere you can disagree politically, but the most important thing is that you need to manage your political grievances in a non-violent way.
Democrats and Republicans always disagree.
Exactly. Trump and Biden have disagreed on something, and Trump and Penn have disagreed on something, but they have never used violence, except only Trump, who have brought militias to the White House. And of course, that's the behaviors where you don't respect the rule of law. And that's why you can act, and that's what you don't want to happen for us in South Sudan. And so we thank the President for that. So we expect the language of cease hostility, frontline commanders, because one of the things that I'm a bit worried about is that some commanders are now making war as a source of livelihood, because if they don't shoot a bullet, they cannot get money. So the only thing is shoot a bullet so that you call your bosses, we are under confrontation, we're facing rough, and please send to us some money, and out of that money, you get some money. So fighting becomes a source of livelihood for some people in certain locations, and I think that's what needs to be stopped. That's one thing that we expect from the speech of the President. And also we expect from the speech of the President really sanctioning of defections, because defectors become a nuisance. They start creating the country to the image, they start turning the image of the country as like we have never gone to school, like we don't know what we're doing, and we are aware of what we're doing.
Is it like it's becoming another source of income as well? For
exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's become sort of another livelihood sources, because when we keep on these behaviors of what is going on now, then we're proving Bashir and the rest of the Sudanese and like late Rabi and Sadiq Al-Mahdi correct that South Sudanese will never ever govern themselves. They get confused. They believe too much on their tribal setups. They will not run a state, and we're proving them right if we continue with this. But I think it's not a strategy, but it's some few individuals whom I may categorize them as spoilers of peace and stability in South Sudan.
And on that, the IO continues to accuse the government that they are buying of some of this degeneration.
Obviously, IO may have their own internal crisis, but if you look at the agreement, Article 2.8.1, this article say any party that signed the revitalized agreement in September 2018 is not supposed to do new or fresh recruitment.
They discourage actually.
They discourage that. It's sanctioned actually. It is sanctioned. By the agreement is sanctioned. So what they require is that any party, once other party members are trying to defect, specifically on the security, political there's no problem there. Political, everybody have his own political view.
It's just like what Bakasoro did.
Yeah, that's not bad. But if you have to go to uniform, then that is may mount it as a new recruitment and may mount it as a violation of Article 2.1.8. And I think that's what we feel that the President would have addressed.
But what about the argument also, Yakani, that even if you move from X to Y, if it silences the guns, then why not?
Obviously,
what we want is peace at the end of the day.
In the sense that when they move, they don't turn to violate the ceasefire. But now we have seen the opposite. Is that people turn, and at the same time as they're turning, they start sending a signal on behalf of those whom they have joined. Like they become commanders of the forces that they have joined, and they start issuing, and you have seen it in Unity State. You find somebody who change a color today, tomorrow you start issuing a statement that one of the other party have to quit. If they don't quit, they have to surrender. If they
And
don't
we had
surrender,
that argument last
Yeah, exactly.
week even.
So
the SSPDF and the IO
continue, and specifically around the area of Mayud, Longchuk, and all those areas. So I think that's one of the problems that we wish could be addressed. But obviously, if you look at the speech of the president have said the deployment of the security on the ground in Juba, it's just like any other city deployment. Whenever it feels there's a political tension, you need to ease protection. And of course, he justified that any bullet shot in any location, whether in his location or in React location, may turn or something different. But we wish that deployment could have been made public. That's one thing. And number two is that also we wish that could have been shoved in a way that does not create panic among the civilians and does not target a particular political players in the country. Of course, he ironed it out, which is President of ironed out, and we have seen at least that yesterday night and today morning there's not so much, but still we have seen uniform on the streets. But of course, this in the line of providing safety and security, we have seen that happening. So that's what I can pull out of the speech of the president.
What about Yakani, where he talked about the recordings and directing the security apparatus to make public some of the informations that actually prompted or resulted into the 2026
obviously
crisis?
As a state, in terms of providing safety and security, state have obligation to ensure that any means that may destabilize instability and security of citizens and tranquil the public, the state have responsibility there. But when it comes to tapping and disclosure of the information, in the beginning there's a bit of concern when you mention that, but at least that is say whoever is disclosed in that report, he have received a presidential pardon. That means whatever the report comes is that nobody will be harmed because of that report. But one of the things that comes also, it's a question of this time round, we start raising the question of protection of data protection. Like, is really our data protected? And if our data is protected, is there any law that obliges our data to be disclosed in time? So for me, those are some of the issues, legal issues that are associated with that. That's
right. And Yakani, what do you make of the remarks of President Kiir when he actually he mentioned CPA back in the days, and he talked about the SPLM and where the members of the SPLM wanted to go
quit.
To quit, and then he said, "No, first let me go and talk to President Al Bashir." And he mentioned the IO. He actually kind of tried to balance
the withdrawal. He responded to the question. There's a
Mm-hmm.
question which was asked, like, what he made out of the withdrawal of the IO from all the security mechanisms. And he say, from his opinion, that the withdrawal of the IO is a mistake. He felt that they could have continued dialogue with him, talk to him. Then he used the case study of when he's a vice president, Sudan, they implemented CPA. But let me come specific on this particular point. This particular point, it come to real a responsibility, political responsibility of a mechanism, because this particular trend is enshrined in the agreement. This particular platform or this particular approach or attitude is enshrined in the agreement. What is it? If you look at Article 1.5.1 of the Revitalized Agreement, you read together with Article 1.9.6.1, and you can reinforce that article with Article 1.1.1.1. This Article 1.5.1, if you read together with Article 1.9.6.1, this article, it set a mechanism called presidency. Presidency is headed by the president. The president comes from the incumbent government. So the dialogue that His Excellency the President have referred to, it should be under a regular continuous meeting of the presidency. So, and this is where politically the big issue of the agreement implementation is that we like to jump and blame RJMEC or blame Citisam or blame Draker or blame IGAD. What actually in the agreement, we are given solid responsibility as South Sudanese, as principal of the parties under the presidency, to make decisions for smooth and genuine and timely implementation of the revitalized agreement.
And of course, in a collegial manner with consultations among the presidency.
And that's why part of the issues that IO were raising, if you see the presidential decree on unifying the command structure, because in chapter 2, and I keep on saying, several times in these platforms, I've repeated that unification of the forces does not start with the graduation of the unified forces. It starts with unification of the command structure. Because even if you graduate the forces and you don't have a unified command structure, where are they going to get the instructions?
But President talked about the number of generals.
Exactly. I'll come back to that. But let me just answer first the element of the dialogue. So the regular meeting of the presidency, which is headed by the president, and then deputized by first vice president and other vice presidents, is a platform of a continuous, of what the president described as sustainable dialogue. That mechanism need to function. And who is supposed to call that mechanism? It's His Excellency President, supposed to regularly call for that mechanism. Because why? Any decision that come out of that mechanism, it's a decision that the presidency have agreed, and it's a South Sudanese political party's decision that is binding upon everybody's opinion.
Are you saying they're not meeting regularly?
They're not meeting
You're
regularly.
calling for
They are
the president
not
to meet
meeting regularly. I'm calling for a regular meeting. Even this decree could have come as an outcome of that meeting.
Could it be because they have busy schedule, probably with the different, the clusters as well?
I don't believe busy schedules. Because even the clusters,
They're
you
heading
can
different
sanction-
clusters.
You can sanction the clusters for this meeting. This meeting is supposed to have a timeline, and you can sanction the clusters to it, because it's a meeting where you can reach consensus, and nobody can escape responsibility, like the way how I escape responsibility of the decree by saying, no, this decree is unilateral, is not a decision of consensus making. So
decree is that?
the one of relinquishing the positions of the deputy chief of staff and deputy IGP.
Right.
And even also the language of relinquishing is a bit problematic, because the language is part agreement is supposed to be reconstituted rather than relinquishing, because relinquishing sends signal that like somebody's been kicked out and you start fearing. So for me, it's a question of the mechanism of the presidency. You need to have a regular meetings. Like I used to joke, I say, when Raila and Kibaki form a government, this particular approach was used for Raila and Kibaki, and also it was used in Zimbabwe between Robert Mugabe and Shangarai, that it's a coalition government. Always coalition government function under the concept of consensus building. That decision is made through consensus.
Yeah.
So even if Raila take tea with Kibaki, and Raila comes out and say, we have been in a serious consultation, while they're taking tea, the public take it until the other side opposes, no, that's not a consultation. So the meeting of the presidency could have ironed out a lot of this misinformation that is going around the country. So, this misinformation simply because people don't see a regular meeting of the presidency. So for me, that mechanism, and that's what I wish that when President was saying that implementation of this revitalized agreement is harder, but he is committed for its implementation as a government, and this should be implemented through sustainable dialogue. So the sustainable dialogue is sustainable and regular continuous meeting of the presidency mechanism.
Right. Looking at the structure you talked about earlier, and we had this conversation with the government spokesperson several times. Jesh ما بيبدأ من فوق لتحت، بيبدأ من تحت، يعني عدد بتاع الجيش ده كم أولا، عدد بتاع الجيش ده كم على أرض الواقع، يلا بعد ذاك بتجي تشوف الcommand structure. So what does the agreement say regarding this here?
For instance, you can unify the command structure in terms of structures. Not in terms of physical.
And President talked about generals. So,
exactly.
Many of them in the IOS
exactly.
Today.
For example, how many do we need as commanders in chief? Militarily and all over the world is one, the president. How many chief of staff do we need? Militarily all over the world is one chief of staff.
Right.
Then under chief of staff, what are the structures? What are the ranks? Then that structure, as a high top structure, we agree upon it. Then we start building this structure down. For example, as President say, everybody in South Sudan, I don't know why people like this title from Brigadier General Apollo.
He told React to go and reorganize his force. He said he needs 7 days, and up to now it didn't happen.
And by the way, recently I come to realize also there's a self-promotions in the army.
Right.
For example, I'll give an example. I'm today in the studio as an activist. So it's a matter of me, Eddie Moniakane, jumping into the bush of Yei with my RPG. And
then you come from there, Major General.
And then I create myself. I create myself a title right from there. As I'm in the bush, I will call Irid and say, okay, I'm no longer Edmond the one, that's an activist. Now I'm chairperson and commander-in-chief of this particular movement. And I give myself a title, commander-in-chief. So I look at the president, what the president have. Maybe I subtract 1 star or 2 star from the president, and I break him the nafsi. So then I stay there for 6 months. I call somebody close the president. Edmond, I feel time has come for us and talk with the president. President to make delegation. We go to Wire and Nairobi, or we go to come. And then I sign a local agreement there. I come back. You don't see me as Edmond again in the studio like this one. You have to come and find me with my bodyguards, with my ranks and everything. And some people start promoting themselves.
How can these be addressed?
Exactly.
From your perspective?
These can be addressed when we have a political attitude change. And these can be addressed when we have the top leadership of the country never compromise with the spoilers. Because the spoilers are the one entertaining this.
So if these generals defect from X to Y, they should
completely they should not be encouraged. They should not be entertained. And I think for me this still goes as a primary responsibility of the president, not to compromise with the spoilers. Because the spoilers take advantage of that. And they buy off people and they send people to that. So what we need to do is that these need to be stopped. And these have to be, and that's why I think one of my proposal, I'm quite sure this, I radio, some people are listening, some people are close to the president. One of the things I've seen
We're live
with
on
the latest,
Facebook, actually.
one thing I've seen with the recent experience in the security sector, one thing I will advocate for is that the security sector have to be separated from the political processes, and the security sector have to undergo professional examination. Some people create title of themselves. They must go written exams, practical exams, physical exams. You didn't qualify. Uniform
That starts from Bilfam, for instance, from
everywhere. And I think President should sanction that, making sure people have to go for physical military exams, physical, written, and then also use the guns.
But practically, Akani, also we have generals who liberated this country, and they
we can appreciate them.
We mean like it's time for them to retire or to go home, for instance?
That's what I'm saying. We can appreciate them through DDR process. Give them package.
The DDR.
Even age matters.
Right.
Age matters in the military science. So some of people are very old, that they need to go home and rest, and we appreciate them for that. At least I've been amara tabik wayo tabik ten yala badu lasma kamakormin bilfam alekal arka bedda u masalama kalas.
And you have the veteran affairs, by the way.
Exactly. Who can take care of that? So for me, the biggest problem is that the leadership of the country have to be serious in dealing with this issue, because the more you don't deal with them properly, the more they entertain. It is matter of these defections that are happening that we're talking about, is that the defection now is from opposition to the incumbent. Let the incumbent cut the lifeline of the milk and the lifeline of the bread. Again, they will start changing colors. And we have seen several times, there are names we know in this country that tomorrow they're black, next tomorrow they're blue, other day they're red, until when? Right. And all these are on the expenses of service delivered to the citizen. All these are on the expense of peace and stability of the country. So in the speech of the president,
right,
I think that's something that he have mentioned. And of course, he have mentioned transitional justice, that accountability. And I remember
that's chapter 5.
Chapter 5 is one of the chapters. In the beginning was been, people are fearing it. People call it an international chapter. It's not good. It's spoilers of the agreement. Now it becomes fluid. It becomes sweet that His Excellency President said we're going to implement it. But also we start getting the language of the security arrangement. Start coming to chapter 5.
Right.
Some time back we've been promised. In January we're going to see the commission established. Now the language of
which commission?
The Commission for Truth, Healing and Reconciliation. The Commission for Truth, Healing and Reconciliation have its process. The process is that you need to have consultation through means of justice, after the consultation of the public, because public opinion is needed on what define healing, what define reconciliation. Then from there, you need to draft a law. The law have to go to Parliament. Parliament have to enact this law. First, the law have to go to Council of Ministers, passed by Council of Ministers, taken to Parliament. These processes are needed. There's no shortcuts for that, because that process is very important. But my concern is that the language of it will be soon, which you have seen in the chapter 2 of the revitalized agreement about graduation of unified forces. In 1 week time, in 2 weeks time, it is soon. It's now coming chapter 2. Last January, I promised, by the end of January, we're having the commission. Now, the language of it is soon to be established. It will soon be established. It's coming all towards chapter 5. Right. And good enough that one thing that I like, the president have made it very clear. Justice and accountability, there's no compromise. I like that from the president.
Justice should prevail.
Justice should prevail. Of course, justice should prevail for people who are spoilers and for people who cause atrocities and people who undermine the stability of the country.
And it goes back to 2013.
Obviously, and His Excellency President have referred to a very concrete document that the Obasanjo report sets the basis of justice and accountability. And also, President have mentioned that hybrid court will be established. And of course, I know this is one of the court that some leaders in the government are very hard on about it.
And what if it implicates leaders who are currently in power?
The question is,
how will that be
justice and accountability have no compromise. So we should be ready to face the consequences, because it has no compromise. It may follow everybody, and that means everybody will be held accountable. And of course, this is based on ethics. It's not based on any political sentiments. It's based on ethic and processes.
And Yakani, let's briefly talk about the graduation of the necessary unified forces. People are tired of this sentiment. And we're talking about lack of funds. And there's this public outcry outside there. Last week, we saw more than 150 vehicles bought by the SSP, by the police. So what narrative would you really share with the public regarding the issue of funding in the forces continue? We are receiving calls every day from soldiers in the cantonment sites that they're
one of the things that is disturbing me is people who tend to push His Excellency President to use the language of no funds. And I don't know why they don't feel that they are giving. The seat of the presidency is a national position, by the way. It's something that everybody should respect. It's a national symbol. So when you say we don't have funds to graduate the unified forces, and we have this number of vehicles of the police that we have seen, and we have police in Rajab that are waiting to be graduated and distributed to some states, and some counties are crying, we don't have forces. It's contradictory. It's contradictory. Of course, we need to see our police empowered and reinforced to provide us safety and security. And we have heard from the police spokesperson by saying some of these vehicles will be distributed to the states where there's a continuous armed cattle raiding, which is very good to cut down the level of armed cattle raiding for safety. But I think that it is time for us to be responsible enough that some of these actions we're doing should not contradict our action towards transitioning the country from violence to peace through the implementation of the revitalized agreement. So for me, you say there's no money here and somewhere there you're showing strength that I have money to demonstrate this is real contradictory. This one thing. And secondly, also good that yesterday President have mentioned, and this always what disturbs me. People used to say we don't have rivals to graduate the forces. But yesterday President have mentioned very clear, when they were fighting in the bush, were they fighting with the sticks?
Machine guns, that's what he said.
And he say, where are those machine guns? Where are those machine guns? Because if you look at the agreement have sanctioned fresh recruitment. So the people are supposed to be unified and graduated, as opposed to those soldiers who are actively shooting at bullets at each other. Shooting bullets at each other. That means they're supposed to come with their physical guns, register under the state, and it become a state assets under the constitution, and use it to graduate the unified forces and redeploy the unified forces, that they don't pay any allegiance to anybody except the constitution and the flag of the country and the national anthem.
Yes, and Yakane, don't you think President was right by mentioning when we were fighting, both of us go with machine guns? That's what he said. And logically now we don't have they don't have guns.
No,
the training centers. So it doesn't make sense. The president was right or not?
He is right there. It does not make sense. And the question is also, he's been denying for quite long. Some people have been writing the speech of the president using the language because of arms embargo. We don't have. Now look at what yesterday the president said. It contradicts. So all this time it means we put the image of our president into a very contradictory position. Now yesterday he said, where are the rivals? Come with the rivals, let's register it. And I think it's really, for me, that's really a very, very, very fruitful message that the president have made it very clear. Right. Because we're supposed to unify people who are fighting. Where are their rivals? These are supposed to be registered, and once registered, pay allegiance to the constitution. So the element of political contradiction and the element of play game around the implementation of peace agreement, the parties shared responsibility for that. Right. They need to be honest to us. They need to be open. They need to be there. And coming to the presidency, the mechanism of the presidency have the responsibility to make the implementation of this agreement in 1 week time or 2 weeks time. So what is required is a political will. The challenge is the mechanism of the presidency is not meeting to make decisions on this agreement simply because the level of trust among the members of the presidency is high. Let us be honest. Let us be honest with ourselves.
There's no trust.
There's no trust among them. Because if they trust themselves, it's very easy. Look at the way how yesterday the president was saying, imagine, he is a vice president. And remember Sudan by then, Bashir is more powerful.
Right.
Bashir is more powerful. And president is in Khartoum as a vice president.
He was the first vice president.
He's first vice president in Sudan, where everything is under Sudan's control.
Right.
But what did he say? He told his team, no, we can't withdraw. Let's go and face Bashir.
Go and talk
with
Bashir
his team.
out.
Yeah, let's go and talk with Bashir, with his team. Let's confront ourselves. And yesterday he made it very clear. When he approached Bashir, Bashir told him, yes, what you're saying is making sense.
He was responding to our colleague actually.
Yeah, exactly. So he say, yes, what you're making sense. So now let's consider the constitutional committee. So if the presidency mechanism in South Sudan could have been regularly meeting, the president, first vice president, other vice president, they could continue regularly meeting, and quite sure they could have ironed out these issues.
Do you think if the president do not actually call for a meeting, do you think the first vice president, the other vice president also have the right, for instance, to call for a meeting?
And that's why, for me, I feel primarily the responsibility is with the president to call them. Even if he want to do something and he failed as a sense of nobody should call them. And as a president, he can sanction the clusters to turn up for the meeting. So for me, if there's people who are listening, one of my humble appeal as a nationalist is that His Excellency President have the responsibility to call for the meeting of the presidency and keep on informing the country.
What do you want them to do when they meet?
For example, if they meet, there's a burning issues that they need to make decision in that meeting. If they meet, they can check at the timeline of the agreement. They need to make decisions. If they meet, they can't make a selective implementation of the agreement. They have to go smoothly. If they meet, they see where the challenges. They can compromise. These are challenges. Let's do this. Because as our leaders, if they decide that under the presidency, none of us have the responsibility to dispute that, and even anybody regionally, internationally, have no responsibility. So it's the responsibility of of president to make sure that the mechanism of the presidency is functional, so that you don't give chance for spoilers, because there's a spoilers who are regional, there's a spoilers who are international, there's a spoilers who are national. They take advantage of the non-functionality of the mechanism of the presidency to give interpretation. Look at what the social media have done. Just look at the last 2 days. The social media have made some people even to panic, because they start creating news of nowhere that does not exist, but social media will put it on, and it's becoming. And
it's good that the president came out clearly and talked to the people of South Sudan here and others. Now, let's talk about this issue of timeline you mentioned, Edmund Yakani. Let me take you back to August last year, where President Kiir affirmed his commitment to the conduct of the general elections at the end of the transitional period. We're talking about next year, and you mentioned something very important: the timeline, the implementation matrix of the revitalized peace agreement.
Obviously,
do you see South Sudan will go for elections next year?
The reality is the environment is not conducive for elections.
What do you want to be done before elections?
For instance, are these politicians ready to campaign across the country freely, without fear? This is one thing that we need to ask ourselves. Or should we campaign in a one particular town, and we send delegates on our behalf to go and campaign somewhere? And specifically, if you want to campaign for the seat of presidency, it's beautiful if you move across the country, see children, see young people, see elderly, see people dancing and jubilating and questioning you in stage when you are sending down your manifesto. That is required. So rain is starting next month. Exactly. Rain is starting next month. Our infrastructure is not in position. Even our security sector is not yet unified to the level that we can trust. There's a pocket of violence going anywhere. And remember, President have given one strong indicator for credible elections during the 5th Governors Forum. President was saying, if we're going to go for elections without rule of law, he himself will fear that this election may not be credible. So what does it mean? It means we need to have a very strong strengths of rule of law functioning in the country, so that anybody want to misbehave, you can discipline. Unless we want to go for tribal elections, that, for example, I go to my community and I say, I'm the only educated one, I'm the giant, I'm the brigadier general, I'm the minister, confirm me, I'm going to national parliament, confirm this one to go to state parliament, confirm this one to go to county, unless you go for those tribal confirmation. But if I to go for real elections, civic education is required, specifically for national seats, the national, in terms of presidency and then the parliament. And you can't do civic education in the next 5 months or 6 months when the rain season started, and already have started rain season starting. And remember, IGAD Climate Center have made an alarm that South Sudan eastern side is going to have a very extreme big rains that I have never experienced before. And the western, exactly, and the western side of South Sudan is going to expect drop in the amount of the rain. So it means the western side of our country is going to face drought, and then the eastern side is going to face flood. And we're going to have migration of population. And remember, the way when we migrate in our country, the defense of the land, we go for violence. We start buying new AK-47. Look at what's happening in Magui. So we are going to have those situations coming up in this particular period. We're going to go for elections, and the elections are supposed to be done at least by December or January, so that February come 22nd.
But the agreement talks about 6 months before the end of the transition.
Exactly, I'm saying. That's I'm saying. That is in terms of worst case scenario. But this we can't. So,
but until when?
The reality.
When do you think this country will be ready for election? I mean, since independence, Junubin did not go for elections, did not vote.
Obviously, let me tell you.
Permanent constitution up to now.
Election is the exit strategy, politically, of transitioning power with the principle of honorable and peaceful transfer of power from one player to another, because the attitude of we want to transfer power from one player to another, not honorable and peacefully, it will never help stability in this country. That's one thing I'd like to make it very clear. So the only thing that can make us have an honorable and peaceful transfer of power is elections. But let us be serious. Elections require well preparation. Why? Because we don't want to use election to trigger the country back to violence. And let me give experience on 2010 elections. Remember 2010 elections? Even results make some people to rebel. What made David Yawyao to be in Pibor? What made late Abdurrahman Soleh in Western Equatoria? What made George Ator in Jongole?
So what do you think can happen differently from
exactly, and what made even Peter Gadet in Unity State? Because results, that some people in elections have attitudes that I'm automatically the winner. And when the results stand against the automatic spirit of belief that they're the winners, they jump into the bush. And with this fragile security sector, what are you expecting? And many people will declare revolutions.
On the civic engagement, on civic education you mentioned earlier, 6 months is not enough, not even 1 year or 2 years. You know, the level of literacy in this country as well. So
let me tell you, elections, civic education goes so fast and so easy when rule of law is holding, when the security sector is unified and people feel they are safe. Let me tell you, in 2 weeks' time, people will know what are the symbols, what is the voting system. because politics is a game of the day of citizenship. But that will happen when people have no doubts on some few things. What are the things that people have? People have no doubt on rule of law. People have no doubt on their safety and security. People have no doubt that somebody is coming to attack me because I'm expressing my opinion. People have no doubt when I'm expressing myself, I'm not locked in, I'm not arrested, I'm not jailed, I'm not tortured.
Right.
That one will make elections faster, even in 1 month's time.
And
People will know.
yes, and Yakani, it seems like the revitalized peace agreement is really quiet when we talk about census. And I had we had this conversation with Michael Mokwe, Information Minister, 2 weeks ago, and he talked about it's not a must that Junubin should go for a census before the elections. But
Obviously,
how will
there's a
go
models.
for voter registry, for instance, before the elections?
There's a models. There's a models. Yes, you can say, for example, the beauty of census is that when do we have election? We have election 13 years ago. During the time, some people are children, and they might have now become eligible voters. If you calculate the time of the last votes of 2010 until now, some of those children are now eligible to vote, and they need to be registered to vote because their age have reached to voting age.
18.
And remember, also young people constitute 70%. That number of 70% must transfer as a good voters here. So, but there's a models that you can use. For example, registrar, which has been used in US, is that if you want to be eligible to vote, then you need to register. So the moment you register in your constituency or in your area, automatically indicates the moment you come with nationality below voting age, you will be turned out from registration that you are not eligible to vote. The moment you register, you become eligible to vote, and that gives you to follow up the timeline of what is coming next after I've registered, because I'm interested in the election, I want to vote. So that's what will happen. But that means also if there's a security and stability in that, because you may disconnect massive population from voting. For example, refugees and IDPs, if you want to use the voter register approach, that
the agreement says they have to be at least voluntary repatriation of their
so you can use that model, and that model has been used in so many countries. And also there's another model of sample. We ask question: can we have elections while some parts of the country are destabilized and all these? Some people use justification that there's a model. So you can look at Libya elections, you can look at Iraq, and then you can look at some samples where situation that is there's a huge instability, but elections was used to somehow craft something. But they still look at the Libya situation. It's been divided into one section UN recognized, another section not UN recognized. Look at Iraq, the same thing. One section is one recognized, another, because some people take advantage of the instability. And that's why our prayer is that putting South Sudan into a stable trend is very easy.
Wow.
What is required is political commitment and political will. The moment you implement the revitalized agreement, some of the political arguments, you render them meaningless, and you will only have an opportunity to move. So this revitalized peace agreement offers opportunity. So though some people describe that it's very difficult, it's very complicated, I don't think this revitalized agreement is very complicated. This agreement it requires proper political commitment and will, and where you really intend to deliver what is here. I know you can't deliver this thing in a given period of time, but there's actions that you can undertake and transfer some of the results that you're expecting now to the future. So and that commitment is what is required.
And this issue of election, before we can wind up, running out of time, Edmund Yakani, we'll talk about the issue of permanent constitution, very important, and the reconstitution of some commissions and independent bodies as well, including the elections commission.
Obviously, if we want to see the framework for better election in this country, what do you want? One, you need to review South Sudan Political Party Act 2012. And also you need to review South Sudan Electoral Act 2012. Once you review, you enact through a parliament decision, that's done. Next thing, you need to reconstitute South Sudan Political Parties Council. You need to reconstitute National Election Commission. These two laws are very important. But also, there's two ways with the constitution. You either go for elections after you secure a permanent constitution that reflects the system of governance you want. That's one scenario. And this scenario requires time, because constitution needs consultation, and it means
an information minister argues that it can happen within 1 day or 2 days.
Obviously, there's a literature you can do that. There's a literature you can go to other, like for example, I used to tell people you can go for this following literature, the desk review. You can bring national dialogue. You can bring all the papers of the political parties that were submitted during the negotiation of the agreement, because I have those papers. All the political parties, some of them have already disappeared actually. I don't know where they are. Their names,
called briefcase.
Yeah, the parties. Right. There's a lot of submissions when we're in the negotiations of papers. All those papers, you can put them to a desk review, and you can generate out of them an idea of the constitution that you want per the submission of politicians and individuals and other groups like women groups, civil society during the negotiation.
Youth,
you can collect, you can collect all those papers, the national dialogue plus others. You can build out of it literature of a constitution. Those are very good ones. But also what you can do is that you can do, there's a model done in South Africa, there's a model done in Southern Africa. You cannot go for elections without constitutional declaration. Even Sudan have done that. You have a constitutional declaration. What do you call constitutional principle declarations? You declare principles for what constitution you want. Then you go for election. Then the elected government take those principles to enact a permanent constitution. There are approaches. But these approaches happen when we have the following. When you have stability, specifically security stability is very important, because so that argument will not lead to violence. Disagreement will not lead to violence. Mobility is easy. I don't feel scared. All this process without a dialogue, and that's why even if president himself can confirm that we need to implement this agreement through sustainable dialogue. So if the space of dialogue is not there, if you want to speak, you are tortured. You want to speak, you are called. You want to speak, you are picked up. You want to talk, you are told that, look, I will lock you here. You want to speak it at Botaka Egypt and when that tendency continue, dialogue is sanctioned. When you sanction dialogue, freedom of expression, access to information, assembly, association, when you sanction that one, what next you do? You make people to start designing an alternative way of embracing dialogue. And that alternative way is always centered at culture of violence, which we don't want it.
Right. And Yakani, before we wind up, I just want you to briefly also say something about the international community and its support to the peace implementation in South Sudan. And this tendency or this idea, the government always looked at the international community as not really supporting the implementation of.
I don't know what does that refer. I don't know how to refer. There's a few indicators that some of our leaders need to refrain from the language. What are the indicators?
I heard what Lomoro said.
What are the indicators? What are the indicators that international community is behind us? One, who is funding Citizen? The flights are flying around, all this. And later on to come and say, Citizen, give us report. But if you want Citizen to function, to give you report, who is putting money to make Citizen function? It's the international community. The meetings of RJMEC, that we say in the RJMEC, we need to do this. Who is functioning that meeting of RJMEC? It's the international community. Humanitarian aid, that we're hearing millions that are declared. That is at least a sustained livelihood. Who is doing that? International community. That's part of it. Come to the financial pocket. Look at what World Bank and IMF is doing. And look at the acknowledgement of reforms that Troika. And by the way, this is one thing that I'd like to bring to the listeners. And to those who are hearing my voice and they might have speak to the president. The gains we have got through the public financial reforms that is acknowledged by Troika, acknowledged by World Bank, acknowledged by IMF, offers a big international opportunity if we can turn that spirit to chapter 2. The way we can implement chapter 2 in the same way we implement the public finance, we will find a right track in there. So some people are paying lobbies to go and lobby to win people to support. These are the area of lobbies. Use this to lobby the international community to get more funding. So I don't think that we need to blame the international. We need to blame ourselves. That's what I like to say. If you argue this is a South Sudanese problem, need a South Sudanese solution, you complete. It's a South Sudanese problem, needs South Sudanese solution with South Sudanese money. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edmond Yakani, Executive Director of Community Empowerment for Progress Organization, for joining us on The Dawn today. We have come to the end of The Dawn edition. Up next, news in Arabic with Abaju Kuchagawa. On behalf of The Dawn team, producer Charles Wote, my name is Emmanuel Joseph Akili. Do have a good day.